Hi and welcome back to this video series covering our primitive plugins inside Unreal Engine. In this video we're going to cover the primitive rectangle. So let's jump right in. In our list here I'm going to search for primitive and grab the primitive rectangle. Let's go ahead and drag that into our level over here and move it up. So let's start covering the properties. So just like the primitive box, we can actually set the pivot on our shape here. So again, I want it to be positioned nicely to the bottom over there, so I can set this to 100, and then I can just move this down to the position that I want. So there you go. That's the pivot, and obviously we can do the same for the X position. And just an example of like why this is, sorry, not the X, let's go ahead, I meant the Y over here. So why is this very helpful? If, for example, if I have two of these shapes and I actually want them to be positioned one next to the other. So let's go ahead and grab another one and throw it in there. Okay, so right now what I can do is I can just try and position this to one next to the other, but what I can actually do is set the Y. So on this primitive, on our first one, we set Y to -100, and on this one I'm going to set it to 100. And then I'm going to have a look at what the position of this one is. So this is Y location. Let's set this to 0. And on my other primitive here, I'm going to set this one to 0, 0 as well. And so they both have the same location, but the pivot point is set differently. So we can actually position these elements side by side without having to do too many calculations, which becomes very helpful when positioning these objects. So let's just go ahead and set our Y back here to 0, and let's start changing the size of our rectangle. So you could change, if we just lock this up and increase the size using the scale, which is perfectly fine. But if you want to actually set the size of your mesh without having to adjust the scale, because that might affect other objects inside your level or the environment that you're building, you can actually define the size of the mesh, and that's what you can do here with the width and height properties of the primitive. So let's set this to 200, and our height's going to be 100. So we have this scale, and then I can go ahead and change the scaling for it to fit inside my environment. So that's a tool that can become pretty handy when you're trying to size different objects and create your environment. Okay, so the next four properties, the corner radius properties, this allows us to change the corners. So right now they're all set to 10, and we have this nice sort of bevel over here, but we can change this. And so if I set it to 0, we have a sharp corner, and let's set this back to 10, and our bottom right, I think it's this one, I'm going to set that one to 0. Oh, that was the other one. So let's set this one to 0. So we can have this sort of call out shape, which can be cool if we're creating games, or you need to create different meshes to fit in inside your environment. You have total control, and you can play with this and get really creative however you would like. Okay, so the corner segments, we can play with this. If we bring this right down to 2, you see we get these very rough edges, these sharp edges across it. And if we just slowly bring this up, you can now see it becomes a bit smoother. Set it to 4, even more, 5. I think 10 gives us this really nice smooth edge. So another tool to allow you to define how your shape looks. So right now, if I go ahead and just play with my camera, again, we have a 2D shape right now. And just like with the, I think it was a circle primitive, we can set the extrude to make it a 3D shape. So let's just set the extrude to 100, and now we have this shape, this 3D shape inside our level. So it's pretty hard to see with the lightning, so I'm going to want to add some materials to the shape so we actually see what's happening. Again, I'm going to use my example material here, and I'm just going to drag it onto the front material. So there we go. Again, just like the other plugins, you can set different materials per face of your shape. Gives you full control. Let's go ahead and set the red on the bevel. Again, we don't have a bevel yet, so let's go set up our bevel. I'm going to set this to 20. That's pretty sharp bevel. Let's bring it down a bit. I don't want such a big one. And there we go. We have this bevel along the edges of our mesh. So if we go ahead and it's applied just like before to the back of our shape as well, and to the corners. And let's go ahead and set the extrude. So now we have this sort of red shape on the red color on the extrude. So that's pretty much it, and I want to cover the stretch property as well, which is pretty cool. So if we set this to something like 50, so you see it actually stretches, it sort of skews our shape. If we play with this slowly, you can see as I'm moving it, it sort of stretches out our shape or skews it. Again, another tool to allow you to create whichever shape you want. Let's set this back to 0. And finally, the bevel segments. Let's just play with this as well. If we set this to, it was set to 1 before. And let's just zoom in onto our bevel over here, get a nice view of it from here. So you can see it's pretty sharp. And if we start playing with these bevel segments, you get this really nice, high quality, smooth corner on the edges of the rectangle here. So that covers the rectangle primitive. Again, the point of these tools is to allow you to become creative with inside Unreal without having to go and master other 3D applications. Just allows you to create those finishing touches and a lot of freedom as a designer. So thanks for watching.